Distinguished guests, please welcome to the stage Grammy-award-winning musician, artist, community activist, a founding member of East LA-based Big Frente Zapatista, and member of the award-winning bilingual Chicano rock band from East Los Angeles, Quetzal Flores.
Sí. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's wonderful to see so many beautiful faces, some familiar, some not so familiar. I'd like to start by invoking the spirit of Julia Bogani, a Tongva ancestor, and bringing her words into this space. She says, our ancestors imbued the responsibility and obligation of our original instructions, guided by the protocol and etiquette of being part of, caring for, and ensuring the well-being of the extended family and defined community. In its most inclusive expression, nature, capital nature, and transmit those teachings and responsibilities to our children, grandchildren, and many generations to come, and to all those who live here. So this thing that we're playing with today, that we're going to be centering our hearts and our minds and our bodies in, this question of race and a racial future, right, has so much to do with this idea of nature and the original instructions of nature and the natural world and how we are supposed to be, how we're meant to be as human beings, interconnected in this whole network of nature. And so, for me, I'm so profoundly proud and filled with joy to be here and to be introducing the next act. That is an example of what happens when human beings have access to identity, to power, invulnerability, to not having to fracture themselves off into these pieces, but to be able to be whole and to arrive whole in any different space. And the things that they can create, the messages that they can transmit, and the ways in which they can move us. And so I'd like to welcome to the stage Nepantla, 3 young people. Go ahead, come on. This is Mizan, Natalia, and Sandino. And they're called Nepantla, which is the in-between, the Borderlands. I'd like to welcome them.
Thank you so much. We are Nepantla Forever on Instagram. That first song was called, that was two songs, two separate songs. The first song was called All About Love, which the title we based it on a bell hooks book. And I love bell hooks. And everyone should love bell hooks, should get into bell hooks. The book basically talks about how the state of love in the world is a bit rotten, and we need to start at the root to change things, and the root of that is actually white supremacy. in everything, right? Just as like every intersection meets, everything affects everything else, right? So all this homophobia, the misogyny in the world, the ableism, all of that is rooted in white supremacy and systemic oppression. So that was what we wanted to touch on in the first song, which was called All About Love. Yeah, that was basically it. That's the colonial mindset
Yeah.
we have to get out of.
And that second song was called Purify, and it's about, I wrote it about the traumas, I guess, that religion, like organized religion, which is really popular over here in the West, and I guess how that impacts children like myself growing up, and I guess feeling all of the guilt for, I guess not abiding or fitting exactly what Christian or Catholic ideals would expect of the youth. And yeah, so this next song is called Your Best American Girl. It's by an amazing artist. Her name is Mitski. This song is about being a person of color and having relations with a white person, and just all of the clashing, how it will affect, I don't know, our self-worth, and I guess how those two relationships interact.
Yeah.
Anything else?
So this is the theme, right? It's like I don't know. I think to me, white supremacy is probably the biggest illness. And it goes hand in hand in narcissism. And I think that everyone in the world is just so traumatized. But yeah.
If I could, I'd be your little spoon and kiss your fingers forevermore. But big spoon, you have so much to do, and I have nothing ahead of me. You're the sun, you've never seen the night, but you hear its song from the morning bird. Well, I'm not the moon, I'm not even a star. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to end with a little... Oh, that's it? Thank you so much.
First grade teacher, so.
Good morning, everybody. Buenos dias.
Buenos dias.
My name is Leticia Buckley, and I am the CEO of La Plaza de Cultura y Artes.
Joe-san, my name's Gay Yuan, and I'm the board chair for the Chinese American Museum.
Well, as long as we're doing that, I'll say mabuhay to everyone here today. My name is Jim Herr, and I'm the director of the National Center for the Preservation of Democracy here at the Japanese American National Museum. And it is my pleasure and relief in some way to welcome you here today for the opening session of our shared future, Reckoning with Our Racial Past in Los Angeles. How incredible was that band? So y'all know that was Quetzal's son, Sandino, right? On piano. Like, I happened to see them at La Plaza a few months ago, and so when Quetzal recommended or suggested having his son's band play, I was like, oh my God, yes. They're so incredibly talented. Like, it's unbelievable. And where's Karen Mack? Karen Mack is one of our distinguished guests today, and we'll be speaking later, but she has an incredible daughter as well. And I look at these kids, and it gives me hope, because there's so much not to hope about, but they're amazing, and they really are. They're so talented, and they're so engaged, and they're so like with it. And I think it just is a testament to what a life in the arts and an education in the arts brings to people and brings to youth. So we need more of that. We do want to take a moment to recognize that we are on occupied land. Land that originally belonged to and was inhabited and is still inhabited by people from the Tongva, the Tataviama, the Serrano, the Kish, and the Chumash peoples. They all lived here and continue to live here in Los Angeles County. We pay honor and respect to their elders, to their descendants, past, present, and emerging, as we continue to help them steward these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization has resulted in the land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility, our collective responsibility, and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original peoples of Los Angeles. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, to live here on what was their ancestral lands. We are dedicated to building sustainable relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including but not limited to the Fernandino Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Tongva Indians of the California Tribal Council, the Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians, Kish Nation, the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, and the San Fernando Band of Mission Indians.
And I was standing backstage watching Quetzal watch his son. It was amazing. Oh, really amazing. This initiative, and we want to thank our Smithsonian colleagues who are here with us today, You'll hear from Dr. Mack and get an opportunity to meet with everybody. But this initiative explores the history and legacy of race and racism and seeks to spark positive social change and build a more equitable shared future. With programs that range from symposia and panel discussions to films, food, and family activities, Our Shared Future, Reckoning with Our Racial Past in Los Angeles, highlights the dynamic, challenging, and multicultural nature of the arts in Los Angeles.
So over the next 17 days, we have, with our institutions along with other participants throughout Southern California, we will be presenting an opportunity to work collaboratively to highlight the important role of the arts in creating a civil society. With programs that range from symposiums, panel discussions, films, family activities, and exhibitions. Our Shared Future, Reckoning Our Racial Past in Los Angeles will highlight the dynamic and multicultural community members to experience all our museums. And before I hand the mic over again to Leticia, I also want to recognize Michael Trong, who is our executive director for the Chinese American Museum. He should be the one up here today, but you will be hearing from him later through various other panels.
And this really is the beginning. This is the spark that we hope, as we look around in this room, there's so many partners and collaborators, that this is just the launch of this work. So many of us are doing it, coming together. The culminating event will be Family Day on Sunday, December 17th. It'll take place at all three of our venues, at JANM, at CAM, and at La Plaza, simultaneously, and include activities from other Southern California attractions welcoming Angelinos of all ages to celebrate diversity of the city and the county. It's an easy ride from Metro from here to La Plaza and CAM. A full schedule of programs and free tickets are available at janm.org/Our Shared Future LA. And it's written down there. You don't have to remember it.
So throughout the days, you will be meeting our friends and our collaborators and our partners from the Smithsonian. Dr. Mack, for your team's sake, we ordered wonderful weather for you, and I want you to note that we came through with it, okay? This is a very important and powerful initiative, especially during these days where the reoccurring hate happens again and again every time we think that we've been able to find solutions or ways to address it. So, Dr. Mack, you and your team, whom I know you will be introducing later on, was very important to us as we've gone through these many months of planning for this special presentation culminating events. So thank you very much. And we look forward to all of you actively participating in many, if not all, of the activities that we've planned for you.
So there's a lot of programs. Are there any ones that you're really excited about? Because I know I'm excited about a couple of them.
All of them.
All of them. Okay.
I mean, right? All of them.
What I think is wonderful is like all the food programs.
The music, the beauty,
it's everything. So please check out the calendars. Get tickets because tickets are going fast for some of these events. So make sure you get online. You can do that right now if you want. I won't say anything. We didn't take your phones. But we are really excited for today's conversations, for the speakers that we have, and looking at continuing this collaboration not only through the next 17 days, but beyond, and including all of the other institutions that are being a part of our programming over the next 2 weeks or so. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce a man who needs no introduction. He's an amazing leader for our institution here at JANM. He has a long history of public service. I'm sure you know who he is. Ladies and gentlemen, JANM's board chair, Mr. Bill Fujioka.
Good morning. Well, I'm going to follow in the spirit. Konnichiwa. It's only Japanese I know. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You know, it's real difficult to follow three exceptional individuals. All of us were given notes, and the notes are very, very similar. So as I'm looking at my speech, it's like, oh my God, they said this, and they said that, and they said whatever. And so, but today, most importantly, I'm not going to try and say the same things. But on behalf of the JANM Board of Trustees, our governors, and our staff, we want to welcome you to this amazing event, the launch of our shared future, the reckoning of our racial past. The Smithsonian Institute, I think you'll hear more about what this initiative does to explore the history, the legacy, oftentimes the trauma of race and racism in America, with the ultimate goal to achieve social change. The one thing I hope, this is not a one-time event, folks. This is something we should be doing on an ongoing basis. We should be holding hands with other communities, whether it's the ethnic communities, it could be religious communities, it could be the LGBTQ community. We should be holding hands together and coalesce around the common goal of social change and a better America. It is with amazing pride that we here at JANM, the Japanese American National Museum, participates in this program. You heard about the programs that will be offered and the partnership we have with CAM and La Plaza, the partnership we have with the Smithsonian Institute is extremely, extremely valuable to us. This series will highlight the struggles, contributions, works, and as Jim said, the food of indigenous and immigrant communities. These communities, and I hope people through this process, not just this one, but on an ongoing basis, they'll learn and to appreciate the contributions of these communities to overall society and to make America better. You know, on a personal note, some of you, a lot of you are hearing me for the first time, and some of you know my family's from Boyle Heights, right across the bridge here. In Boyle Heights, there were Japanese Americans, Chinese Americans, African Americans, Latinos, Jews, Russians. There's a multitude of ethnicities and cultures. We didn't see a difference growing up. We just saw friends. We went to their homes. We ate their food. The first time I had chili was when I was 5 years old. I thought my neighbor was trying to kill me. But I went into other homes, and there were different religions. But we played together. We lived together. We learned to respect each other. That was a long time ago. And given what's happening today, it's eons ago. But it's my hope, it's my dream that America could become Boyle Heights again. Because we didn't see a person's color. All of us were poor, but we all shared everything we had with each other because we were just friends. All we cared about is, were you my friend? Were you my neighbor? There were no differences. Now, this program would not have happened without the dedication, collaboration, and support from many organizations. I want to thank the Smithsonian Institute. I want to thank CAM, La Plaza, for being our partners in this initiative. You heard about the schedule. You've seen the schedule in front of you. It's something where we have a 17-day period to experience some of this. But I hope when it's all said and done, you do it on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis. Go back to these institutions. Support our ethnic and cultural institutions. I also want to thank additional partners for this initiative, including the Agua Caliente Cultural Museum, the California Black Freedom Fund, the California Science Center, the Columbia Memorial Science Center, and the Museum for Latin American Art. You also heard that the time is going to run, so I'm trying not to repeat everything, and also to use Metro. But most importantly, this is not a one-time affair, folks. This is something where I think the beauty of where we live here in Los Angeles, and it's also experienced in other parts of America, is our ethnic diversity. I have a 32-year-old son. When he was young, 4 or 5 years old, I'd have him close his eyes and hit a map of LA County, put his finger on a map, and we'd find a community, and I'd drive him to that community. And I said, here we are in Little Armenia, here we are in Thai Town, here we are in Filipino Town, here we are in Leimert Park. And I would show him the difference, but most importantly, I would share the food from that community to say, these are our brothers and sisters. I hope that this becomes a spark where we get together more often and we celebrate not our differences, but our commonality. The fact that we grew up here and we all want a better America. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you for coming to JANM. And now it's my pleasure to also highlight the support from Supervisor Hilda Solis from the LA County Board of Supervisors. She's been a champion for our museum. She's a personal friend, but more importantly, she's a champion for social change, equity, and democracy. And on her behalf, I have another friend who we had the pleasure of working together, her Senior Deputy, Tammy Omoto Frias. I think he's going to say a few words, but thank you very much. Enjoy.
Thank you, Mr. Fujioka, my previous boss.
You want me to stay up here?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tammy Omoto Frias, and I am the Senior Budget Deputy for Supervisor Hilda Solis of the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. Thank you for allowing me to make some comments on Supervisor Solis's behalf. Today's convening, our shared future, reckoning with our racial past, is sure to be a day of positive and hopeful discussions, but also difficult ones. Those uncomfortable discussions are always necessary if we are to have truthful, sustainable change. And I think that there is no more appropriate place to launch those discussions in this wonderful 17-day series and take the deep look within ourselves than here at JANM. The Japanese American National Museum serves as the steward of not only Japanese American history, but of America's history, a timeless reminder of a moment when this country was gripped in fear and racism, and as a result, failed to uphold its own core values of freedom and liberty. And as you consider how racism shapes our everyday life and how we live in this world together, I am reminded that it always starts with good policy, and that is fundamentally the role of government. And to that extent, I would like to make sure that you all know of the LA versus Hate program that Supervisor Hilda Solis initiated in the county for anyone who's a victim of any type of racial or LGBTQ violence, to please make sure that you call 211 to get some information on whatever resources the county can provide to help you in this time of crisis. The county has also launched our, I can never remember the acronym, we call it RD, Anti-Racism, Diversion, and Inclusivity Program, to make sure that all the dollars that we use, taxpayer money, is used with thought on how we can make our funding investments equitable. So please know that the county is working hard for you. So I would also like to thank the Smithsonian Institute for bringing this series to LA. It's very exciting. To JANM, CAM, and the county's own, La Plaza, for hosting and continuing to be the relentless advocates for equality, for dignity, and respect for all people. I'm pleased to see other partners here as well, some of our CBOs that we work with. And so with that, Supervisor Solis has asked that I present a scroll to the following organizations, so if they would please come up to accept them. The Smithsonian Institute. Thank you, Dr. Beck. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. There you go.
The Japanese American National Museum. Thanks, Bill. The Chinese American Museum. And La Plaza de Cultura y Artes. Thank you. Thank you.
We're doing a photo?
Sure. Can we please? Okay, let's do a picture.
Let's get you out of the way. Come here.
You want to be in the middle? Oh, no, that's okay. I'll be the middle.
Best part, watching how we organize our photos.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So it's my pleasure now to formally introduce our keynote speaker for today, Dr. Deborah Mack. I think I speak for all of our institutions that when I say how grateful we are to be working with Dr. Mack and her team, and that she had this amazing vision for bringing this initiative to Los Angeles, because this is the first time they've done it anywhere outside of DC. She recognizes the rich diversity of art and culture that we have in our communities and that our institutions represent. She welcomed all of our ideas with so much enthusiastic support. I think I literally could have told her that we wanted elephants, trapeze artists, and a marching band, and fire eaters, and she would have been like, either, yeah, that's wonderful, go for it, or found some kind of very nice, gracious way to tell us that, that may not be too possible. But what I love is that she understands that cultural institutions know their communities. They know the people that they work with, and we're the ones that can be trusted to best communicate and connect with them. We don't always get that from people that look to support us. So we owe such a great debt of gratitude to her, and so we've poured so much effort into the next 17 days to make this initiative work here in Los Angeles. Formally, she is the director of our Shared Future Reckoning with Our Racial Past at the Smithsonian, and she's also the associate director for strategic partnerships for the National Museum of African American Art and Culture. From 2000 to 2012, her national and international professional practice centered around museum strategy and strategic planning, on interpretive and exhibition development, and on cultural and heritage tourism. She holds a PhD and an MA in anthropology from Northwestern University and a BA in, I love this, geography from the University of Chicago. Please join me in welcoming our really special and honored guest, Dr. Deborah Mack.
Thank you all for being here. I hope you can hear me. I have a mom voice, so I sometimes need to step back from the mic. Okay? It's true. Straight from my kids. I want to thank you all for being here. This is a real pleasure and privilege for Smithsonian. And we're able to do this. This is, as was said before, the first of what we hope is a national multi-year series of national conversations on looking at the legacy of race and racism and its impact on today so that we can all share in constructing new futures. Before I begin my remarks, I'd like to include a welcome. We have a video welcome from the Secretary of the Smithsonian, Lonnie Bunch. He had hoped to be with you here today, but he has a congressional meeting instead, and since much of our funding comes from Congress, that took precedent. It's a short welcome intro, and I'm going to ask that they play that right now.
Good morning, Los Angeles. I'm Lonnie Bunch, Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, and I want to welcome all of you to the National Conversation on Race. On behalf of my pan-Smithsonian initiative called our shared future, reckoning with our racial past. This convening is part of an ongoing series of conversations designed to spark positive social change while building a more equitable shared future. We do this by exploring the complicated history and legacy of race and racism in the United States in local communities such as Los Angeles. The Smithsonian is only one small part of that equation as we want to work with groups that are known and trusted in your own communities. For this gathering, we've convened 3 extraordinary community museums and cultural organizations to collaboratively develop these 2 weeks of programs together. That is so important for us. These organizations are the Japanese American National Museum and the National Center for the Preservation of Democracy, La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, and the Chinese American Museum. This program came together to explore Los Angeles' vibrant, rich, and at times dark history with race. These programs feature learning about foodways, listening to panel discussions, visiting exhibitions, and attending live cultural performances. We hope that these programs offer you the opportunity to expand your understanding of how race is interwoven in all components of our shared daily lives. As a scholar of Los Angeles history, I am excited about this program and very pleased with our collaboration. We hope this will be engaging, edifying, and help us all be made better.
I would also like to add to our Smithsonian thanks acknowledgement from our founding sponsor, Bank of America, and I'm hoping that actually some of our Los Angeles Bank of America sponsors and supporters are here today. Mr. Garrett Ginn, Raul Bustillo, and Stephanie Lomibao. Not only have they been supporting the work here in Los Angeles, but it is Bank of America that heeded Smithsonian's call for support in launching this national initiative. We come away inspired. We hope that you do as well. My team is already inspired, and several of them are here today. The project director, Travis Helms, programs manager, Patty Artega, and our evaluation and research colleague, Pei Koi, and we're doing this because this is new for Smithsonian. The Smithsonian, with the 19 and now 21 museums, 8 research centers, has no specialty, no experience in addressing issues of race. So we've been, in a sense, building this boat as we sail it. We are crafting and developing a team, and it's important that we document everything, that we learn while we are learning from our partners who are very experienced in doing this work, and we want to be able to document and measure sustainable change, sustainable action, so that this can go forward long term. This is not a short-term Smithsonian initiative. This is intended to be a permanent Smithsonian fixture and includes all of our museums and all of our research centers. This initiative arose out of the impassioned protests that happened nationally and globally during the summer of 2020. And we were very grateful that Bank of America responded to our plea for support in developing this. Bank of America has been very patient with us because the double pandemic of racist activity, of the destabilizing because of community protests, and the pandemic of COVID slowed our ability to be able to put a team together. Smithsonian is emerging from that, as many of our cultural organizations and heritage organizations are.
and Bank of America's support has been an integral part of everything that we can do. To give you a little background about this initiative, we have a primary purpose, and it's in alignment with Smithsonian's mission, the increase and diffusion of knowledge about the history and legacy of race and racism while building pathways towards a more equitable future. We're going to be doing this primarily through programming and partnerships and our internal processes. This is not an initiative that's just confined to us. As we speak, the entire Smithsonian is undergoing radical organizational change that has never happened in its 150 years of history. We are examining and re-examining everything, structurally, credentialing, staffing, what we do, how we do it, the management of collections, the repatriation and respectful return of collections, especially around sensitive, shall we say, or culturally appropriate cultural materials and human remains. These are all policies that are under development right now. How we use our buildings, how we use our sites, how we partner, where we are, not only in the nation but around the world. All of this is going on simultaneously, and we're all speaking to each other and referencing each other in this common work. Our partnerships are something that we felt we could support because one of Smithsonian's assets is its great convening power. We do have 6,000 plus employees, and we are in multiple countries around the world. So we feel that one of our roles is to work with organizations such as these three critical partners who we chose quite intentionally because of their histories in doing and addressing this work. Here in Los Angeles, we feel we can amplify the work that they do, and again, we're learning from them as they do this. You should know that the programming you see is their own invention, and we really applaud that they worked for several months together collaboratively to create this portfolio of programs that you're going to experience and enjoy over the next 2 weeks. We feel we can amplify their work, we can strengthen collaborations. We were happy to hear that they had worked in different ways with each other before, but this was the largest opportunity to date and has set the stage for future and ongoing collaborations that are even expanding with additional partners. We're also in our processes looking to have a measurable shift in creating more inclusive institutions, not only at Smithsonian, but providing support for our partners to be able to do that. Those of you in heritage work, in cultural institution, nonprofit organizational work, understand that all of this takes time and staffing and resources and can be very hard to do in any circumstance. But presently in this country, with the kinds of pushback that we're seeing in many arenas, it's become even more difficult. We hope that Smithsonian support can really help push this forward in many ways, not only on the ground, but again, we are learning by watching our organizational partners. We are happy that this collaboration is one that shares multiple perspectives and multiple stories. I think one of the great learning ahas for me was that not only did each of these organizations have their own stakeholders, their own core communities, there was a lot of overlap, not just presently, but historically. They were each able to recount how they had been involved in each other's communities going back multiple generations and actually well into the 19th century. How many of the places that we see today in Los Angeles are radically different than they were 100 years ago and how they've changed over time. These cultural partners hold those histories. They share those histories not only with the casual visitor and with organizations, but very importantly with schools in helping to develop and co-develop curriculum, in helping mentor and instruct teachers, in amplifying the work that they do. The Smithsonian is not, shall we say, a model for any of this. Part of our investigation is looking at the harms that Smithsonian itself has been involved in. That's part of this ongoing resolution with our history, and again, in working with partners for better models, learning how we ourselves can improve. Our Los Angeles program partners were in part chosen because we have prior experience with them in this particular arena of work. And they enjoy not only tremendous respect with the Smithsonian, we understood that they enjoy tremendous respect in their own communities. That was important to us because these are new initiatives, these are difficult conversations, and they each brought a measure of trust because of their prior performance and their long-term engagement in these arenas. This is not something that is new for them, and it's something that, again, we are learning from, and we are hoping that we can expand what they do. Some examples of that prior experience and even the current work or even the recent work that they've been doing. JANM's Common Ground exhibition chronicles Japanese American history beginning in the late 1800s, from the early days of the first generation and continuing through World War II and incarceration, post-war resettlement, and the redress movement. Presently, also a new exhibition that originated at Smithsonian and is traveling is The Bias Inside Us, which is presently, has just recently, I believe, opened here, and that I hope you all see. This is an exhibition that each institution that receives it is customizing and expanding on its own histories, its own stories, etc. La Plaza had LA Starts Here. It's a permanent exhibition that highlights untold and overlooked often indigenous, Mexican, and Mexican-American stories from the pre-colonial era to the present day. And the Chinese American Museum has this permanent cutting-edge exhibition, The Birth and Rise of Chinese American Communities in Los Angeles. I think radically unknown to most general publics. And it celebrates the growth and development of Chinese American enclaves from downtown LA to the San Gabriel Valley. Just recently, our partners have shown time and time again their convening power. They've demonstrated this in ways that are very impressive to us at the Smithsonian, and in many ways, I feel far exceeds what we can do despite our national presence. JANM a few months ago hosted Solidarity. The Black Panther Party discusses the history and future of coalition building, and it showcased how the Black Panther Party worked with Japanese Americans in LA and what a future roadmap of solidarity with shared marginalized communities could look like in the here and now. The reopening of the National Preservation of Democracy Center later today continues this legacy of reconvening and conversing around democracy and the issues that are not only domestic but global for all of us. La Plaza, after the release of the recent LA City Council recording, where overtly racist remarks and behavior were uttered and demonstrated by elected officials, created an Afro-Latino series to combat anti-Blackness in their communities and in larger LA, and acknowledging the rawness and the harmful truth that racism can hold and be voiced within communities was an important part of dealing with it, not as part of the past, but in the here and now. The Chinese American Museum recently commemorated the 152nd anniversary of the 1871 Chinese massacre, remembering the 18 lives that were lost during the tragedy, where anti-Chinese hate and violence were never addressed and redressed in terms of justice to this day. And these events make sure that we don't bypass this history, and it also reminds us that this can continue even today. Again, I'd like to note that these partner organizations have partners and stakeholders as well in various arenas. But on the final day of programming, Family Day on December 17th, there will also be present the Museum of Latin American Art, the Agua Caliente Cultural Museum that just recently opened, the Columbia Memorial Science Center, because much of this in terms of science, technology, environment also comes out of racialized histories, racialized constructions. Other collaborators working with our partners include the California Freedom Fund and the Involved Filipino Americans organization. And I think I wanted to quote something that Jim Hare said early on. Where is that quote? But it basically, when our first approach to Los Angeles and saying to the partner museums we wanted to begin this national series that will continue here, Jim was not surprised. He said, basically, of course, because LA is really the most globalized area in the United States. We represent more of the home countries in this city than anywhere else in the United States. And we don't sit and ask for permission. We just do it. This is another reason that we applaud LA. I want to thank you for your time and thank you for your attendance, and I hope to be able to communicate with each of you during these next 2 weeks. Thanks again.
So we're going to take a little break now, give you time to stretch, get some coffee. Our lunch is being served if you want to pick up your lunch now. And we'll break for about maybe 10 minutes, so don't go too far, please. And you can say hello to the people that walked in late and they're on the other side of the room. And they're not trying to avoid you, I promise you, just go say hello. And so we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Thank you. Feel free to keep eating. But we do have an amazing panel coming up to talk about some really important issues facing not only our community here, but I think our community around the country. And this discussion is going to be led by the incredible Karen Mack, another Mack, not related, but they don't know that. We're going to do some DNA testing between sessions today. It's been my pleasure to know Karen for almost, I don't know, maybe 15, 18 years, something like that. I first knew her when she was recommended to me. I was at the Boeing Company where we were doing these fellowship programs for the Southern California Leadership Network. And somebody said, you need to talk to Karen Mack because she's amazing. I'm like, okay, I will. And I did, and they were right. She is absolutely amazing. She's one of our, we're proud at JANM to be one of America's cultural treasures along with East-West Players here in Los Angeles. But if there's a person that's a cultural treasure, it is Karen. She's one of the most visionary leaders I think that we have, the way she brings together the arts, community, and in the really engaging and thoughtful and fun ways as well. From festivals, and she does these tours of different neighborhoods in Los Angeles. I think I've been like on 4 or 5 of them, and they're just fantastic. She does this around a nonprofit that she founded about 20 years ago called LA Commons, which is based in South LA, and it provides artistic and cultural programming not only for that area of South Los Angeles and Leimert Park, but all over the city and county. Karen is a public service fellow at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. She was vice president of Community Partners. She holds an MPA from Harvard University and MBA from John Anderson UCLA School of... Sorry, my Trojan friends. How about that football game? Ooh. And she's also, Bill is losing it over here. She recently completed her service as co-chair of the Los Angeles County Cultural and Inclusion Initiative. And in her spare time, I don't, like who's kidding, she doesn't have any spare time, but she has a wonderful family. As I mentioned, she has this incredible daughter, and the apples don't fall far from the tree. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Deborah Mack. I mean, Miss Karen Mack. Too many Macks.
I don't know if I want to change places necessarily, but maybe, particularly coming down to the Gullah Islands. I can't wait to do that. So maybe I can transport and get that done. Ashe. That is particularly, I think, important today. The Yoruba word that means soul, light, spirit of good vibrations. And you guys can come on up. Why don't you come in? Recently, I was talking to Deborah Nakatomi, who I know many of you in the room know and is a wonderful treasure herself, about the void of spiritual or soul nourishment that we have in our modern society. We can see it in many ways. For me, it's most evident in our drug addiction problems, our suicide rate that's off the chart, and other illnesses of the spirit. We started this conversation because I believe that cultural institutions have an important role to play and can really be thought of as sacred spaces. And in this time when what is true is up for grabs in the public discourse, the truth inside of us is the most important place to find that stability. And our cultural institutions are keepers of our stories. The place where we are standing is a perfect example. I really feel like we are on hallowed ground. Given the horrific tragedy that took place here in World War II, but also it is a site of, tremendous resilience, community triumph, a global model for how to draw strength from our stories and our connections that we have at our disposal. This is why art and culture are some of our most important weapons in the fight against inequity. So our conversation today, this panel that is called Race at the Intersection of Wealth, Health, and Equitable Arts Funding, is going to be about how to activate these cultural strategies, these powerful cultural strategies, as key tools in advancing a society that works for all of us. I'm so excited about this conversation because I am sharing the stage with these warriors, these equity warriors. Let me just introduce them. I was so inspired by what happened before I kind of changed my remarks, but I am joined by Jim Herr, who you've met, and he kind of told you his side of our story, but I similarly have this great admiration for him, and if I wasn't married, I would probably like, I'm spending my whole day here so I could just hang out with Jim, because he's so awesome. So anyway, but he directs the National Center for the Preservation of Democracy, and this after having such a long career in philanthropy, working at Sony, the California Community Foundation, the Annenberg Foundation. So he really brings this amazing lens on, what the philanthropic landscape is to support all kinds of initiatives. Bob Ross has been the president of the California Endowment for a really long time now, actually. He's actually about to transition, but when I think of innovation in the philanthropic sector, I really think of him. We are a grantee at the organization, and I've had a ringside seat to the thoughtfulness and courage with which TCE, under his leadership, has moved the needle on health equity, really, making moves that, everybody's like, oh my God, are they gonna survive this? And what's I think, been so valuable is that he brought so many different kinds of experiences to the role, from being a public health officer to being a doctor, just various perspectives and understandings so that, he could guide his team to do very impactful work. Dr. Muntu Davis, if you were doubting that there was a warrior up here, I can safely say that this man, in his role as public health officer of Los Angeles, was basically in charge of keeping Los Angeles County safe during the COVID crisis, which, is COVID over? I don't know. Yes, let's give him a big round of applause. And, the fact that he is still standing, and able to function is beyond me. But he's, been doing this work of, being the chief medical officer of Los Angeles, and prior to that, Alameda, for a very long time. And the fight for equity has been central to those roles, and I think I was listening to a podcast of him, and he talked about being a medical doctor and how, he wanted to give his patients advice, but then the challenges in their community prevented them from actually following through on his advice. So he decided he would work in the policy realm, and obviously has been very effective in that role. So we are really grateful to have him here. And then Leticia Reed Buckley is one of my dear colleagues. We served as, and I want to give a shout out to Kristen Sakota, head of the LA County Department of Arts and Culture. We served with her as the co-chairs. Oh, and Mike Che, too, who was our other co-chair, yay, of the Cultural and Equity Inclusion Initiative of LA County. And so she has been doing this work of cultural equity her whole career, pretty much, and that extends to her current role as the CEO of La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, which really lifts up the Mexican and Mexican-American experience. And this is a perfect role for her, given her background as an East LA homie, and the daughter of Mexican immigrants. I can't think of a better person in that role. So as you can see, we've got an incredible panel, and we're going to really explore this issue of the connection between race and how people fare in society, particularly around issues of health and wealth, and really digging into this issue of how cultural strategies can finally move us forward on these issues that have been plaguing us, for much of our history as America. Even, given all of the different ways that we've tried to address it, we hopefully have some answers today. So I will move over to my chair, and I really want to start with Dr. Davis. I have a mic. My dress didn't go up. That was one of the questions. She was like, "Are you sure you want this chair?" But it's working. So Dr. Davis really has had a front row seat in terms of, the impacts of, I'm getting distracted by all these people I'm seeing now that I know, so sorry about that. And so I really would love for you to just tell us, how you've seen, the lens of COVID, other lenses, what are the disparities in terms of race that you have the front row seat to witness?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, and I'm happy to see all of you here. I do want to give regrets. Dr. Ferrer wasn't able to make it, and she wanted to send her warm regards to all of you, both for the roles that you play in your organizations, the fact that you're here and as part of this conversation, as well as our panelists as well. So I'll talk about health, but I'm not going to tell you stuff that you don't know. I'm not going to tell you stuff that you haven't seen. And the role of the health department is really 4 things. One is to gather all of the population health data, compile that, and put it out in a way that helps you understand it. So much of what I'm telling you, many of you have seen, lived, have family members who are part of those numbers. It's no different in that regard. But one of the roles that we have that's unique is trying to figure out disease control. So based on what we're seeing, how do we stop it? How do we prevent it? How do we control it? And in order to do that, we have to coordinate with a number of different folks. We don't have the authority or the power that are needed to change everything that we see. It requires a lot of you, your organizations, and others, both at the government level as well as in the private sector. And then the last thing is really to make sure that you all know what's out there. Both providers know, the public knows, the press knows, and our elected officials, our politicians know. So you all know that in general, our communities of color, and in particular our low-income communities, which are largely comprised of people of color, have the worst health outcomes. And you also have seen and heard a number of times that really this is about the individual. It's their behaviors. Because they drink too much, they smoke too much, they use drugs, they don't have safe sex, etc. But then you have to ask the question, why? Why do people not eat healthy? And so, as Karen was mentioning, this is where I ran into this issue of social determinants, social inequities. And very realistically, when you think about the heart disease that you see, where you see heart disease, where you see high blood pressure, where you see diabetes, if you look at the context of the neighborhood, you will mostly see fast food places. You will see advertisements that say, and you can pay rent. I won't say which fast food chain that was, but that's a very real ad. You'll see liquor stores. You'll see more cigarette ads. And so when we talk about the context of health behaviors, they are shaped by our environment. They're shaped by what we're exposed to. They're shaped by what we have easy access to. And in many of these instances, people are just trying to live. And so when we talk about trying to address these disparities that we see, yes, we have to tell people what behaviors they need to follow, but we also have to ensure that their environment, as well as their jobs and their working conditions, support those behaviors and support those habits and reduce their risk. So what we've seen is historically, largely in terms of Black and brown communities, Latinx communities, having some of the worst health outcomes. Not only when we're talking about death, as well as in terms of these underlying causes of death. And then again, when we look at what they're exposed to, when we look at working conditions. Now, COVID is a prime example, and even to this day, COVID is not over, unfortunately, but we are at a place where we have vaccines, we have testing, and we have treatment. Those are the things that we didn't have in the beginning. And when you think about back in those days, how many of you in this room were able to work from home? And all of the people that were getting sick and being exposed and dying had to go to work. They didn't have that option. There were many stories of people who were sick, family members were sick, they didn't have sick leave. They were worried about putting a roof over their head. So when we talk about the disparities that we see, we have to ask the question, why, and why? And none of those whys can repeat the one before. And when you get down to the basics of it, it gets down to beliefs and values. In our society, we have devalued some, we have othered others, and certain people belong and certain people don't. And those beliefs and values shape what we see in terms of health outcomes. It shapes what people are raised in, what they grow up in, what they pray in, what they play in, and where they work. And those differences are really what we're trying to change. And it's going to take all of us and much of what we do in society. But really, it's along those societal conditions around education, around economics, around the environment, around other social factors that we start to see those differences.
Thank you. Dr. Ross, oh, please. You have been in your probably before you got to the endowment, but for at least the 20 plus years you've been there, really focused on dealing with exactly what he's laid out. And with the stellar team, what has surfaced in terms of addressing the clear inequities that we've experienced?
Karen, and thank you, Muntu, for your leadership during you and Barbara's leadership during the COVID pandemic. Just amazing, amazing stewardship and leadership. Yes, what we've done at the California Endowment is we've taken what you just heard from Dr. Davis and tried to apply it on the ground. Standpoint of a foundation. And it's been the journey, I'm going to try to shorten this, but the journey has been nothing short of transformational for us. We understood, by virtue of our familiarity with the social determinants of health, the greatest predictor of life expectancy and health status in this country is your zip code, where the confluence of community conditions come together to steer either away from health or towards health. And so we did based, this mic is a little in and out. How's that? Is that better? We did a place-based 10-year campaign, a $1 billion campaign from 2010 to 2020, where we invested in 14 marginalized, low-income, mostly communities of color around the state, and we tried to meet communities where they were on this question. How do we help address your health issues through a place and community orientation? And it wasn't, for us, and this is where I know Muntu well enough to know that we agree 100% on this, there's an intersection and an overlap between the discipline of public health, which I had his job in San Diego and also in Philadelphia, and social justice. And the overlap is the following. Public health is an for-all phenomenon. It is an unapologetically inclusive discipline, right? Muntu is the doc for the community of LA. And in his mind, it's everybody. It's all in. It's not public health for some people and for some neighborhoods and for some zip codes and for some ethnicities. It's everybody, right? It's an all-in phenomenon. So it's interesting that we come at this now, because I think, and I'll just say this, I think the conversation we're having today, and particularly in this place, is not just the future of health and healthcare in this country. It's about the future for a thriving nation, right? It's about the beloved community, right? It's about a nation that is unapologetically about belonging, right, and inclusion. And I'm going to share with you one quick story, because I know what I'm describing sounds very lofty, but let me just give you a hopefully quick example of what it looks like on the ground. So we have 14 communities from South LA to Boyle Heights to the Iron Triangle in Richmond. This particular visit that we did was to the community, our healthy community site in West Fresno. And we took our board of directors to a meeting there, and we met with young people, a group of young people, who were organizing Youth Voice in Fresno. And we had an open-ended conversation with them about what do you need from us to help your community healthier, to make your community healthier, right? So these are young people, all black and brown, some Asian Pacific Islander between the ages of 16 and 22. And they told us to focus on something that we were not aware of as a health issue. And I said, Dr. Ross, California Endowment, we want you to help us with reforming school discipline policies. So this is, what year is this? This is early in the Healthy Communities campus. This was probably 2010, 2011. School discipline policies. That's not, we're a health foundation. That's schools and education. That's not us, right? And they went on to describe that young people of color were experiencing expulsions and suspensions at very high rates because of their behavior in the school setting. And in their view, they were being criminalized by schools and by the school district and being felt unwelcome in the school setting, right? For issues that the young people said themselves were mostly mental health issues, right? So we had not really heard of that as an issue. And we had all the research and the data in the world about asthma and childhood obesity and all the other stuff we kind of knew about. This one was not on our radar screen, right? So the board says to me, well, Bob, did you know about this? I said, no, I didn't. We're going to do something about it? Yeah, I guess we should. So we started looking at the data. And the data shows that the kids were right. Not just in Fresno, not just in South LA, not just in Richmond, nationally. Ever since the combination of the crack cocaine epidemic and 3 strikes and you're out, and the criminalization of addiction and behavioral health issues in this country, plus the Columbine shootings from 1999, which reverted to zero tolerance for behavior in the school setting, we've seen a 300 to 400% increase in suspensions and expulsions across the country. Disproportionately impacting, here comes race again, black and brown young people. So the kids were on to something, right? And the reason I say that, and why that has anything to do with why we're here today, is in the practice of public health, specifically, and in a world of trying to make this more of a beloved community as a nation, you need to stay proximate to the pain of injustice. And if you're proximate to the pain of injustice and you show up with humility and the capacity to listen, storytelling is a powerful form of data. Narrative is an incredibly powerful form of data, right? Because those kids were telling us something that we were behind the 8 ball on. Long story short, we began investing in their ability to organize the school district in Fresno, connected them with young people who were experiencing the same in South LA, in San Diego, in Long Beach, in Richmond, right? And they connected, and using storytelling and data and the arts and music and t-shirts, did a statewide campaign. And the campaign was called Schools Not Prisons. Because the data showed that each and every time a kid is suspended out of school, it puts him at a higher risk for falling into the juvenile justice system. They got the attention of school districts, they got the attention of the governor. Their campaign sent 8 bills to the governor's desk. The governor signed 5 of them. Ever since that campaign, we've seen a 60% decrease in school suspensions in the state of California. Culminating in they got the attention of Common, the rapper activist. I'm not sure how he found out about the campaign, but somehow he did. They talked to Common, and Common said, I'm going to do a concert on the steps of the Capitol, and we're going to bring this to the Capitol. And so Common led and brought some rappers in and other folks, and they did a concert for 20,000 people at the foot of the Capitol. And then the next day, they visited the hallways of the legislature, right? So it's the authenticity of the experience of those that suffer at the pain of injustice and being able to recognize them as experts, not just recipients of a charitable act, but these young people as architects of a different kind of vision for what should be happening in the schools, right? Not fewer cops, fewer badges, more counselors, more mental health services, more teen peer counseling, more arts and culture activities, keep kids in school. The worst thing you can do, and I'll end on this, what they were saying to us was the worst thing you can do to a child that is acting out in school is to kick him out of school. What message is that to the young person? What message is that to the family? Right? So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
That was incredible. I see why you get paid the
And I
big
got
bucks.
more of those, too. I got about 9 stories just like that. I don't want to take up all the time. but
Exactly,
I got more of them.
exactly. That's what happens when you get people up here with big butts. No. Leticia, you know, I know you think about this a lot. And so, you know, I'd love to hear from your vantage point as someone who is a cultural leader in Los Angeles, really thinking about how cultural strategies are making an impact locally.
Well, it's really, as you were both talking, I kept coming back to the granular, right? And thinking about during the COVID, at the height of COVID, where were we doing vaccination sites? At cultural institutions. We have voting centers during the last 4 or 5, at least the last 2 elections. But the idea that the work that's happening needs to get to the community, through the community, by the community, and that is a role that cultural institutions across Los Angeles can do and have been doing, often not recognized, right? But I also think one of the things, Dr. Ross, that you really talked about in this shift and pivot of the work that you did based on listening to the community was the fact that you were in power. And it's an important part of the conversation as we talk about shifts and changes, right? Bureaucracy is, I'm a bureaucratic, I'm a deep bureaucrat, I like to say, even in my short time working for the county. And it's hard to make change, it's hard to move policy. But in the last 5 years, I will just note, in LA County, the policy has shifted in a pretty dramatic way, talking about equity. But let's look at who's in power right now in LA County. You have 5 women, 3 of color. You look across the board at who are leading organizations. I mean, right? It goes with, well, it should go without saying, but the reality of it is we see these shifts and we see these changes because we have people in power who know where the levers are, how do we shift them and how do we use them, and we recognize what the actual challenges on the ground are on a daily basis because we live them. And culturally rooted institutions, but cultural institutions across the board, we're on the ground every day. At La Plaza and at JANM and at CAM, race and racism is a constant for us. It's just the reality of it. And it's our responsibility to work with all of you and to work with decision makers to ensure that we are connecting our communities to the resources and to the information, and that we're lifting up those voices, because really arts and culture is just all about storytelling. You choose how to do it, music, dance, art, but it's all about storytelling.
Great. Well, I want to, let's bring Jim into the conversation, and hopefully everyone else too, as we talk about, I mean, we have, and I think everyone in this room knows of the power of cultural strategies. The challenge is, even though we've had these major changes, it's still woefully underfunded. These institutions like JANM, like CAM, like La Plaza. So, you know, what are what can we do to generate more support, given that we know it's what we need, particularly at this moment? We've always needed, but at this moment, you know, I believe there's really nothing more important than the opportunity to cultivate connection, and connection to oneself and the broader community. So, where's the money?
Is there a question in there? Where's the money? That's a really interesting question. And, you know, I think not just for the arts, but the entire landscape of philanthropy needs to change. There are systems of oppression that are tied to where the money comes from, where the money is held, how the money is raised, that just do not serve communities of color, marginalized communities, immigrant communities. I was a program officer in philanthropy for over 20-some years. And I'd like to think that I was a good program officer. Like, I think the people that worked with me, the community organizations I worked with, felt the love and respect that I had for them. And I really sincerely did this work because it was a calling for me, that I felt I was doing good for the world and helping the world. And after years of like a lot of work on myself in terms of the work that Southern California Grantmakers was doing with implicit bias, with some really, really deep DEIJ training at Annenberg with the community grant making team, and just everything that has happened over the past few years, I realized that even as much as I was trying to do good, I did so much harm to the community and to community organizations, because I was upholding these like arbitrary standards by which these organizations were being judged, you know, and they were standards that were set by a very Western-centric, Western-dominated way of doing things, a way of thinking, and cultural organizations, particularly those in communities of color, marginalized communities, immigrant communities, could not compete. Like, how can you expect a $50,000 or $100,000 budget organization to put together a 30-page application and then a year expect them to put in another 20-page evaluation, get it in on time, have it all spell checked and grammar checked? And, you know, I remember getting up in front of a room full of development people and telling them, you know, you have to have, you know, you should have somebody check your applications, because if your grammar is not good, like, that is a reflection of who you are as an organization. I'm like, I'm stupid. Like, I did real harm. And I think nobody goes into philanthropy to do harm. I think we all go into it to do good and to help people. But we have to, we know we keep talking about meeting people where they are. And it's not just going on, you know, a site visit. That's not just meeting people where they are, but it's understanding their needs, and it's understanding who they are and where they're coming from, and how can we help them, you know, and it shouldn't be a competition, but how do we help them, you know, understand the system, or do we just change the system? And that's, you know, I think it's a question that philanthropy has to begin to answer, and I think the trust-based philanthropy movement is helping move that along. But it needs to move faster, and it needs to really, we need to start looking at, you know, there's organizations, even here in LA, $1 million nonprofit organizations that have failed, that have lost money, that have, you know, gone into bankruptcy. And there's, you know, hundreds, thousands of nonprofit organizations with $100,000 budgets that get by every single year, never have any problems, but we won't give them larger grants because we don't know if you can actually handle that much money. You know, we're so worried about tipping the organization, but we never worry about tipping a large organization. And so, you know, I think there's just if we're talking about the intersection of race and wealth, and how there is a coming redistribution of wealth that I think is going to happen, and philanthropy needs to be out in front of that.
So, if philanthropy is a challenge to work with, should we even talk about the public sector and the challenge in working with the public sector to support these kinds of initiatives?
Yeah, I will say this. It's not impossible, but it takes consistent focus and consistent work. Okay. And I want to expand upon what he said. I mean, we often get into these discussions, and I'm not saying that money is not needed. But what he just highlighted was how we practice, how we do our work, how we think about it. And that is something that is one of the easiest things, sometimes the hardest, but one of the easiest things that we can change without money. And that's a lot of what you saw in terms of our change, in terms of even our organization, is what you heard Dr. Ross talked about in terms of how they looked at stuff. It was simply how they did their work. And I question, I'll give an example of this. So in many jobs in government, we have this education requirement for a bachelor's. But there are thousands of people who are doing the work already that don't have the degree. But we don't have a different pathway to get to that job. And so this is really about what pathways can we get the organizations and we can do the work and get to the people that we need to get to that are different from our traditional pathways. But it's a question of how we work. What is our practice? How many times do you see legislation that gets put out to address a problem that we all want to solve, but it has no measurement? So there's funding that goes out, it's going to address this problem, but we don't track it. We don't assess whether or not it's doing well. And in some instances, we dictate what strategy is supposed to be used, which doesn't give the organization flexibility to address the community's needs that it needs to serve. But that's how we practice. May not have anything to do with funding, but that is how we start to change, is how we do our work, how we view the problems, how we attack the problems, and who we include in the discussions about what's needed, and giving them as much information as we have and giving them as much freedom in that decision-making process to change what we do.
Dr. Ross, and I'm giving you an inch. Just teasing. You really are uniquely positioned to think about both the public and the private sector and how to move the needle in terms of generating support for the art and cultural strategies that we know are powerful. I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, a couple I'm going to ask all of us, and I put ourselves even at the foundation. I mean, Jim talked about some of the difficulties of having grassroots organizations access philanthropic dollars. A couple of points to make here. One is we do $200 million. We're a $4 billion foundation, so we're one of the larger foundations in the state of California, probably one of the top 20 in the nation, right? Which means we do about $200 million a year in grants around the state. That $200 million is not even a rounding error on the state's Medi-Cal budget. It's chump change compared to the largesse of public sector funding, right? So the money for real is in the public sector. And how do we, for example, there's a live example right now. We have a dilapidated men's central jail, which kills 20 or 30 black and brown people every year. And the Board of Supervisors is wrestling with a decision about replacing the jail. And you know, our point of view is, back to schools, not prisons, is save that $3 billion and put it in community-based services, right? Which give people hope and a sense at thriving. Mental health services, substance abuse treatment, housing, $3 billion could go a long way, right? So that's sort of one example. Now, in that kind of scenario, how should our dollars be used? And so, to Jim's point, there are a couple of things that philanthropy needs to keep in mind, in our view. One is, and this is going to sound painful because, you know, charity is a wonderful thing. The Bible tells us that charity is a wonderful thing, right? Think more about change and transformation and less about charity. And what I mean by that, and this is the shift that it's taken for us, Jim, at least at our foundation, which is, and I'm not saying this kind of support is a bad grant, don't get me wrong. We will not provide a grant to a homeless shelter to make more homeless beds. We will not provide a grant to a food bank to feed more hungry people. I know that sounds harsh, hearing me say that. In public health, we go upstream. Why are we manufacturing so many homeless people in the first place? Why do we have a nation where people go hungry at all? Right? And so that's a change orientation. It's a transformation orientation. And in change and transformation, the key to that in a democratic society is power and voice and story, right? The reason why young people in the state of California who are undocumented now have access to the state's Medi-Cal program is because we and others funded the Dreamers to raise the issue. Obamacare passes, more expansion of health coverage for millions of Americans, undocumented, left out. And they came to us and said, that's not right, California Endowment. We need you to invest in us so we can get our voices and our stories and our narrative out there so that we can be included in For All in healthcare, okay? So we invested in their storytelling capacity to bring transformational change. They could have asked us to put more money in community health centers so they could get free health care from a community health center. Not a bad grant. That's charity. They wanted change. They wanted the dignity of what their families have dealt with, where their families pay taxes, contribute to the civic fabric of this country, feed this nation, right? They wanted that recognized, and they wanted the systems transformed, which is why they wanted the Medi-Cal program, the state's program for people who don't have health insurance, to have undocumented families in the photograph, okay? That's change, not charity, right? And the faster we get this, and I'll end on this, I'm doing a damn soliloquy up here, sure. The faster we understand that, and here's what we know now that we didn't know 20 years ago as a foundation. Because we always knew, as public health people, and we're both physicians, right, we always know how important the data is, right? Because we're trained in a data-driven, data, right? Here's what we know now that we didn't know then. If you want to see transformational change, if you want to see policy change at the Board of Supervisors, in City Council, in Sacramento, in Washington, no numbers without stories, no stories without numbers. When you show up at the Capitol and you have the data about what school suspensions do to young people, and you had the powerful story of a young person who was suspended out of school and given up on by their school district, if you can't respond to that, I got nothing for you. It's the combination of the data and the combination of the story. And it's about transformation, and it's about systems change, and it's about the beloved community, and it's about belonging and full and unapologetic inclusion. It's not just, I'm going to give a grant to a food bank, because Lord knows there's more hungry people now, and there'll be more hungry people tomorrow, but we ain't doing a damn thing about it upstream to fix it. We got to stop that.
I'm going to pretend that I can follow that. But the one thing I do want to note is when we talk about public sector funding, it's not a zero-sum game. And there's such a mentality around funding at a public sector that this is all arts and culture gets. This is all X, Y get. But the reality is what we're talking about here is leveraging funding, right? So it may not live in an arts and culture pocket that Kristen lives by and breathes by every day, but it may live in public health, or it may live in county registrar recorder. So the idea that funding at a public sector level, at least specifically, is zero-sum game is something we need to stop talking about. And we need to start figuring out and tapping into all of those dollars, because there are And we're seeing it with cross-sector work. We're seeing it with artists in residence and creative strategists and voting center and all of those other things. So the idea that there's this little pot, we got to stop limiting ourselves to little pots. We're done. We deserve the other pots as well.
So there are two things I want to sort of highlight. What you're hearing about arts and storytelling and having story along with data is what is needed to change a narrative. And the narrative is what drives a lot of what we do. How you think about something, what you believe is a solution, what you believe is a cause is what directs what you do. So narrative is the first thing that changes before we start to see policy change. I want to reiterate that. Now, when we talk about some public sector funding, and I'm going to be very real, our budget is around, I think around $1.3 billion as a health department. The vast majority of that funding is not flexible. It is not flexible. So no matter how much money you see there and say, you should be able to do this, no, I can't. We cannot do it because the funding won't allow us to do that. And by the way, most of the funding that comes from the feds don't allow us to advocate, do policy work, et cetera. So there may be funding there may be some inflexibilities in that funding. And so this is where, again, we have to sort of get the people who decide what happens with this funding to change their beliefs and understanding about how the funding should be used. And also to use data to get to the outcomes that we're talking about, but also give some room, because we're not gonna get it right always the first time. I will say during COVID, thought it was great. We're gonna have a mass vaccination place at the Forum. We're gonna be in the neighborhood. I saw more Bentleys and Porsches in those first few weeks than I ever expected to see at the Forum. But we had the flexibility, we were able to change. We had walk up. We created that, listening to the community. We said we got to get back out to the community organizations to get them there because we didn't have enough vaccine to push out into the community. But we had the flexibility to adjust based on what we saw. And that's what I wish all of our funding was like. $1 billion with flexibility. But we don't have that right now.
Great. Do you want to jump in? Or maybe we can open it up to some questions, I think, or ideas from the audience if anybody wants to jump into this conversation.
While they're thinking, I just wanted to also touch really quick on when we're talking about race and wealth and that intersection, the move for reparations, particularly in California. We have a program next week with the California Black Freedom Fund that's talking about reparations for Black Americans. And there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions out there from the public about it. And I think we all need to educate ourselves about it, what it really is. And there's models for reparations, and this institution is one of those. The hard-fought work that was done for reparations and redress for Japanese Americans, so much of that was centered in this community right here in Little Tokyo. There were, I think the biggest probably social welfare program, entitlement program, was the GI Bill. And when you see what the GI Bill did for white soldiers coming out of World War II and their families who were from poor and middle class families, it lifted them. It lifted millions and millions of families up. But systematically, Black soldiers were left out. Filipino American soldiers was left out. The fight for that went on for 40, 50 years to get that reparation for them. And when you see the economic difference between the communities that didn't get it and the ones that did, it's profound. And so there has to be this need for redress. And what that means in terms of economics, I mean, it is such an important topic. And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation here. And I welcome everyone to learn more about it. The incredible organization Nikkei Progressives, who's also sort of situated here in Little Tokyo, has been leading a lot of that conversation. Japanese Americans have been taking part in the task force for reparations. And I think, with it going to the legislation in the coming year, I think it's something that we all really need to talk about and think about.
Any questions?
While we're waiting for a question, so one of the things we're doing, at least at the California Down, we've had this conversation with our board of directors over the past year or so, is for the first time, we're going to have an initiative, for lack of a better term, that is specifically about the space that we're talking about: storytelling, culture, narrative, in advancing health equity through transformational change, right? So what that's going to look like, no idea. We just know it's been an under-resourced area, and I think that it'll be new ground for us. But it's also my belief that Los Angeles is the cornerstone of narrative in this country. The best storytellers in the world are here. And so if we can't mine that, if we can't channel that, if we can't funnel that into equity and justice and for all and for inclusion, I don't know who we should wait to figure it out for us, right? This is, as Muntu said, narrative is everything. Narrative is when you have Thanksgiving dinner and grandma or uncle says, I don't like defund the police, right? Because they have a narrative in their head about safety, right? And the narrative in their head is dominated by police and badges and guns and putting people up and handcuffing them and sending them down to Men's Central Jail, right? And it's time to it's time to imagine a new narrative about safety and community safety, right? But people hold on to narratives hard, man. Narratives die, they die hard, right? But that's what this work is. That's what you're doing. That's why you're sitting here today. You took the time to be here because you believe that the narrative of this nation can be reimagined.
So that means more funding for the arts.
Yes, Jim.
Hello?
Fell into the trap.
Hello, I'm over here in the corner and I've got a question. I'll wave. Hi, I'm wearing the colorful scarf. My name is Layla Hamidi and I have a question to the point of reparations, and I'll offer it in a narrative way in the spirit of what we're talking about. I helped curate a program funded by the Mellon Foundation where we held a talk at the National Civil Rights Museum that included Robin Ruth Simmons, who successfully passed the first federally funded act of reparations for redlining. And in fact, she's hosting a national reparations conference that started yesterday in Evanston, Illinois. I also attended the Hammer Museum's presentation of the California Task Force for Reparations final report, where I thought I would have to fight to attend and get a seat. There were only about 24 people there. And the Instagram post that promoted it was the most kind of contentious post that they'd had, with a lot of people pushing back. And so my question is, to that end, how do we begin, as a nation, this important work? Do you do the Robin Ruth Simmons route of heads down, do it, and then hearts and minds can change? Or is there, within the state of California and this reparations task force, work that needs to be done to lay the foundation for people to believe in the possibility of it?
I think it's more the latter. Like, I think, again, it's narrative change. It's talking about what really are the issues behind it. And I think, again, there's sort of like this knee-jerk reaction that people have to reparations. And one of the ones I hear constantly is like, well, I didn't own slaves, or my family hasn't profited, but your families have. Like, the way that this country was built on stolen land with stolen people, we wouldn't be here today. So you are profiting from it in some way. You may not think about it that way, but I think there has to be the understanding that there have been millions of people left behind through our economic processes and to how we've gotten to where we are today. And if you can't see that it's no longer tenable to have this kind of economic system, I think you can begin to realize how important reparations can be, not only for the people receiving it, but for the rest of us as well. It's not just about giving money to somebody. It's making people whole, and it's making our society whole.
I think there also needs to be a conversation about what reparations looks like. I think the first thing that people think of is money, and maybe that's part of it, but there are probably a bunch of other things that could also be there, and I think trying to understand what those are is important, and it requires more voices to be in that conversation as well. So I do think there's more work to be done around the possibility, but also around what it actually looks like.
I'm wondering, you talked about the Japanese community really coming on board into the conversation about reparations for Black people. What's the opportunity to really build a coalition that is focused on, moving the needle on this issue? I'm reading now this incredible book on the indigenous community in America called it's called The Rediscovery of America, and it's just incredible in terms of complexifying this narrative of Native Americans, which isn't a part of, the probably one of the most important narratives that's invisible to all of us to really tell the true story of this country. And there's another group that has experienced just deep, deep harm. So what is the joint conversation to move the needle?
Well, again, I think, what do we know? We know that, so on July 4th, 2026, it's going to be the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Right? So we're going to mark the 250th anniversary of this republic. Right? And the Declaration of Independence is arguably the last time this nation put pen to paper about who we are as an America. Written by white men, of whom half were slaveholders, and our people were enslaved. Native Americans were being genocidally assaulted. At that time, California was Mexico, right? So it's time for a new social contract. Right? The words in the Declaration of Independence, authored by all white men, still have power. Liberty, justice, freedom, the pursuit of happiness for all. They said for all. They didn't mean for all, but they said for all, right? So I think it's time to just revisit that as a nation. And if it's time to revisit that as a nation, it's not going to come from Congress. Not this Congress. It's not going to come from Alabama, it's not going to come from Tennessee, it's not going to come from Texas, it's not going to come from Florida, right? And so I think the question is whether California on a social contract, because what we're talking about is a social contract, a message to people that they belong, right? That they contribute and they have value, and therefore, schools, healthcare, housing, right? I mean, the GI Bill, a GI Bill for everybody, right? And so I would just say that, don't just sit back there and say, well, philanthropy needs to fund more of this. I think it's upon all of us to put that on our backs as Californians and here in LA. And, I will say, because I've seen other places, LA has some of the most leading edge, innovative, cutting edge, daring, brave, social justice and equity leaders at the grassroots level in the nation. This region is rich with people who are reimagining a new future for this country, right? And how do we get more strategic about that and get in rooms like this? Because it's not just a strategic question, it's not just a moral question, it's a spiritual question. It goes back on the 4th of July, 2026, when we're 250 years old. The spiritual question is, who are we? And we have a very different answer than what we're seeing coming out of Florida right now. Right? And we need to be unapologetic about that. Not cowering in, this is not cowering in political correctness. We have a vision for this country that's inclusive. We have a vision for this country where those at the grassroots who are suffering at the point of injustice have something to say and something to contribute to the fabric of this country. They're not just objects of charitable change and objects of derision. They have a vision for this nation, right? And so that's why I love this. I love what this place stands for. Right? And then lastly, if you have doubts, just look at that monument right outside about the 442nd. Okay? Is there a better story about this country than Japanese Americans whose families were interred crossing an ocean and fighting for this nation and shedding their blood while their families were being interred? Do you have a better American story than that? That's what California needs to show this nation, and I think that's where LA needs to show up. And I'm out. Shit.
We have a couple.
I think I'm going to cry.
As the head of the National Center for the Preservation of Democracy.
You stole my keynote for this afternoon.
We have about 2 more audience questions, and then I think we're going to hit time. So we have one over here, and then I'll go over to Kate.
Actually, this is not a question, but I'm with Nikkei Progressives. I think Jim mentioned that, and a couple of us are here. But I just want to say that you said so many things, people have said so many things up there, and speaking about reparations is that, one is that I feel like the train has left the station. This country is talking about reparations all over. If you listen to all the alliances and coalitions that are out there, there are groups in every part of this country that are talking about reparations, and different cities and states are following California's lead in setting up task forces. So in a way, it's like we're a little behind to say that what's happening, we need to start being that conversation. And the narrative that you're talking about is a narrative that moved all of us as third-generation Sansei who listened to our parents talking about their experiences when they had never spoken before. Those are the stories that moved us to fight for reparations in the 80s, and to win reparations as a community, that moved the community and the country. So I agree with your narratives, and those are the stories that we have to listen to and bring out and talk about in California. We have an opportunity. We're part of now a new multiracial coalition started by the California Black Power Network and the Equal Justice, I forget what the last equity organization, started by some of the people from the task force. And so we've joined it. It just recently formed in November, and I think, Jim, that will be talked about probably on Tuesday as well. But we have a lot of hope in that because that's what we have been looking for. I want to say one more thing is that solidarity, it's not a better story or a better story than the 442, but I think it's an important story. It's a story that we learned as third generation, again, looking back in our history and learning more that our people did unite with other people to fight for justice. And that third world solidarity in the 60s was what moved us to speak up, and that solidarity is what is always trying to be broken. So I think that that is the important message for us here too, is that the solidarity that we build is going to make that change. And that when we're talking about reparations, we know that we didn't get it all, that we only understood part of the story. Money did make a difference, so we felt like we had won. We did win something. We won something as a community. We stood up for justice and we speak for other people, but we continue to do that. And also to say that reparations means the cessation, the non-repetition of the crime. And that's what we're trying to see here today, the non-repetition. Thank you.
It's one of our warriors right there.
Well, and if I could just, I think as we're talking about the building and that we're in that moment, we're also talking about accountability and holding people accountable, right? What does that look like? How do we ensure that the policymakers and how it's being moved forward, there's all, that solidarity and that narrative is also about the accountability and how we ensure that it's not just the talk, but that it's actual action.
Hello, my name's Gay Yuan, and you've heard me associated with the Chinese American Museum, but I'm also a retired teacher from K-12 to university for 55 years. And embracing storytelling as a tool to teach, to get a point across, to influence, is such a powerful way to do the things that we're trying to do as we try to reach out and get our stories told. What scares me horribly recently, after being in education for 55 years, thinking that we finally get our stories told and our history told. There's been a movement lately of us coming out and saying, wait a minute, my forefathers didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Frankly, I don't think that many people landed on Plymouth Rock anyway. But just as I see the beginning of a movement in California, again, taking the lead from California and then across the nation, I'm also now seeing this horrible, vicious movement to put the genie back into the bottle, to put our stories back into the bottle, where once again, people don't want our stories included in the curriculum. People don't want our stories told. They want to continue the way it was with all the lies that have been given. And so I want to hear your reaction in terms of strategizing and what can then we do to influence on that point.
Well, if I just may note, going back to California, in California at the state level, it is now a requirement that all high school students take an ethnic studies course. It's a requirement. You got to do it. There's no question. I got a high schooler, let me tell you. And one of the things, at least in talking about, and this is our amazing La Plaza team, many members of our team are here, but one of the work that we're doing is building curriculum, because what we're finding is teachers are going, I got to do this, but I don't have the curriculum in which to do and to tell those stories. So at least at a ground level, at the cultural institution level, we are building curriculum to ensure that those stories are being told, because there is a moment of opportunity and we are 100% taking advantage of it and we're leveraging it. So getting that in there, and again, it's California. We recognize we're in a blue state bubble, but it's those kinds of actions that we're seeing, at least in terms of results and shifts.
Thank you, everyone. I want to just underscore, we are powerful. You know, they call us the minority, but we're the majority. So we need to act on that and push back and get those narratives out there. I close by saying Ashe.
Ashe.
And on that note, thank our panelists. Let's give them a big round of applause. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Do you want to say any closing?
I think a couple people coming up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ooh, I was thinking.
Thank you, everyone, and let's give another round of applause to our panelists. And thank you again for Kara and Mac for leading this discussion. I'm Michael Trung, the Executive Director of the Chinese American Museum. On behalf of CAM, La Plaza, and JANM, we'd like to thank the Smithsonian for selecting our institutions and our wonderful city, Los Angeles, as the first site for our shared future, reckoning with our racial past. I also want to thank the staff of the Smithsonian, JANM, La Plaza, and CAM. While you may see some of us on the stage, there are many more of us behind the scenes to create the 17 days of programming, and plus, they had to also implement these programmings themselves. Los Angeles is a place that I love, a place that I was born and grew up in, and I grew up in a place called the 626 or the San Gabriel Valley, right? It's all the good food, right? But what I didn't grow up with was access to museums. So what I learned about Chinese American history, my community history, was when I actually started at the museum, the Chinese American Museum, as an intern in 2005. We are reaching our 20 years of anniversary in December. We are grateful to the Smithsonian to have us host Family Day to close out the initiative and to celebrate our birthday. So on the 17th, please visit JANM, La Plaza, and also swing by the Chinese American Museum for a slice of cake. Today, we ask ourselves, how do we reckon with our past when we don't know our history? As a museum professional, I see museums as a community center and an educational landmark for our communities. For many of our museum patrons, we are a place to reflect, to learn, and to share. But this initiative is important because it raises a question. What are our responsibilities as a museum? And how can museums be a space for healing? This is a question that I'll be thinking about, and I'm sure many of our partners, JANM and La Plaza, will also be thinking as we plan our future programming and our exhibitions. On behalf of all the organizing partners, thank you again for joining us. I am proud to be part of this moment today with all of you, who I see as my colleagues and friends, continuing to hold these important conversations so we can truly reckon with our racial past, spark positive social change together, and build a more equitable, shared future, starting here in Los Angeles. To help close out the program, I'd like to now introduce Joy Yamaguchi from JANM with a few announcements. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. If we're shouting out our area codes, 562? Yeah! Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us here today. We are so honored at JANM to host the inaugural session of Our Shared Future, Reckoning with Our Racial Past in Los Angeles. And we really look forward to the next 2 really full weeks of programming. You're going to see some of these events on the screen now. You can also find them on the flyers on your table, so please take one of those, as well as on the shared website, because you definitely don't want to miss anything. We have, in addition to all these programming, several exhibitions on display in connection with this 2 weeks of events, including The Bias Inside Us, which is a Smithsonian Sites exhibition and community engagement project on racial bias, which is right here at JANM upstairs, which you can visit today until 5 o'clock. All the way through January. And then Broken News, which opens today as well at the Chinese American Museum, which uses historic newspaper articles to detail the rise of anti-Chinese sentiment in Los Angeles. And so in addition to this, on Sunday, we kick off the rest of our event series with a conversation at La Plaza de Culturas y Artes about American Latinos in Hollywood. And then you can hop on over here to the first of 3 culinary programs, which first looks at cross-cultural cuisine here at JANM, with some food. I know there's food included in most of these culinary programs, so if that should be an incentive. Followed by Plática y Prueba from China to Mexicali on December 7th at La Plaza, and then concluding the next day here with a screening of Backstreet to the American Dream, where we just confirmed our food truck to be here on the plaza, so definitely don't miss it. That weekend, the Chinese American Museum will also host 2 conversational and artistic events exploring the history of the Chinese massacre of 1871 and its long-lasting impact to Los Angeles to this day. And of course, as Michael mentioned, we're going to conclude on December 17th with a collaborative family day where you can hop on the metro from here to La Plaza and the Chinese American Museum and visit all sites with performances and activities for all ages. So definitely bring the kids in your life and come on down. And I'm really excited, and I hope to see you all at those events, eating along with me. So on behalf of JANM, once again, I want to invite you to join us on the Plaza following today's program as we celebrate the relaunch of the Daniel K. Inouye National Center for the Preservation of Democracy right across the plaza over here. And it's really fitting that this relaunch is happening today on this special day, so we invite you to bear witness outside as we take part in a brief ribbon-cutting ceremony at 1:30, and then that will be followed by a short program inside our Democracy Center's Tatuchi Democracy Forum at 2 p.m. So if you're interested in that, you can visit the registration table outside, and we really hope that you stay and join us. So once again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We hope to see you here again as part of our shared future, reckoning with our racial past in Los Angeles. Again, you can view the full schedule on the flyers on the table or on janm.org/oursharedfuturela. I believe there's also a QR code if you want to scan that to do a survey for us. We would really appreciate it. And definitely refresh your coffee, get some pastries, enjoy the museums, and thank you so much for joining us today.